Welcome to Funny You Say That with Skeptical Scott and friends.
I'm this week's guest co-host, Artie Fisher.
If you've ever rethought what you were taught and said, WTF, then this show's for you. Please join us as we drop the supernatural, embrace the rational, and believe in as many true things as possible.
Hey, Scott, what's the title of today's episode?
The courage to be wrong. I was wrong. There, I said it. I was wrong for a long, long time. There is a cost to admitting that, right? It can be humbling, maybe even jarring, to say those words out loud to others or yourself. Back on the July 4th episode, I talked about the moment I decided that I no longer wanted to go to the church in which we were members after about a decade or so. As my wife is a Christian, I wanted to find a new church that would accept her beliefs and at least tolerate my skeptical beliefs. I visited several churches, but I kept returning to our local Unitarian Universalist church. Our episode with Kristen Merkel, also in July, covers what I appreciate about All Souls Community Church of West Michigan, a UU place I've been growing with since around 2015. But this comes back to that statement. I was wrong. I had been wrong about my beliefs. This comes from a childhood of half-hearted belief in the supernatural while hanging out with religious friends, followed by a decade of trying really hard to believe, almost in a desperate way, enough to have daily talks with the invisible, to be thinking about the deity, that deity was speaking right back to me inside my head or my heart. It gives me empathy for those who not just had a decade of sincere belief, but an entire life of an intense dogmatic religious upbringing. In that case, what's at stake by saying, I was wrong? Some possible costs are giving up a lifelong identity, a loss of relationships with some family members, including divorce, a loss of trust in others or from others, a loss of friendships or at least a distancing from them, a loss of an imaginary cheerleader and advisor. Some would even say their constant companion. For some, it's the end of their career. Why? Because you said, I was wrong. I don't believe that anymore. To avoid those costs, one path of least resistance is to quickly move past any doubts, don't think, and maintain the habits that reinforce the belief, in other words, double down. If at the point where doubts are no longer numb, but fresh and sincere, one may reject the supernatural, but follow the path of least resentment and not say anything. The cost in this case is to live as a fake and to accept the cognitive dissonance, the anxiety of being two different people. No matter what, there's a cost. So yes, it takes courage to say, I was wrong. To admit to oneself, I don't know about what I've learned all these years. I need to look again. It takes courage to say to oneself, I don't think I was right about what I once believed. It takes even more courage to step forward and vocalize, I don't think that is right, or I don't agree, or even just, I don't want to participate. And it takes courage to deal with the discouragement from others as a result. For those who grew up in the church, what have you learned to do when you realize you made a mistake? You ask for forgiveness, right? So let's follow that pattern right now. Self, I'm sorry. I didn't understand what I was doing. I was trying to do the right thing. I'm sorry I put you in that position and didn't act sooner. Will you forgive me? That's a very important step. But for many of us, there could be more. Perhaps we've led others into supernatural thinking or even forced someone else's hand into believing the way we did. Do you need to apologize? You're the only one who can answer that, but me, I have not. I try to remember I was doing the best I could and I was under the influence. I wasn't thinking straight. I had been looking at others as sinners who were damned and needed a savior, or that they were projects that needed to change instead of people. I'll remember what Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better, so now you know. Also, let's remember that we are each individually responsible for our own theology. Some others, when they find out you no longer believe, may feel like you owe them an apology because you somehow deceived them. In fact, a conversation like this just recently happened. My family member did not ask for an apology, but felt like I had lied to them. How could you? Wait, you're telling me you're an atheist now? You know hell is not just a place to stop by and visit, right? How could you just pretend you were Christian this whole time? Really? You're an atheist? And you've been to my house. I've been praying for you all this time. Interesting that this person was praying for me when they thought I was a Christian, and that somehow now this person's prayer was nullified or something because I had been a closeted atheist. I'm happy to say that after that emotional outburst, my family member and I have since reconnected, and they better understand where I'm coming from, even if they don't accept it. While I did not apologize, we both agree we don't want our beliefs to be a barrier to our relationship. For those of you who are believers, I hope this briefly illustrates why it's not easy for some of us to simply say, I was wrong, or I don't believe that anymore. For those of you who are somewhere on your deconstruction journey, it takes courage at every step. I do want to encourage you, though, there's also refreshing clarity on the other side. When we realize there isn't this vague supernatural entity guiding us, we decide to lead ourselves. Many of us experience a weight lifting off of our chest because we are no longer trying to be two people. When one doesn't bet on an afterlife, they can embrace this one life we know we get. With that kind of clarity comes more responsibility. Instead of asking, God, can you help me? You ask questions like, what do I really want in this one wild life? What are the next clear steps I'm willing to take to make that happen? With refreshing clarity, you no longer have to pretend just to fit in. And at least for me, it was clear that I didn't need to be liked anymore. It ended up serving as my personal declaration of independence. And guess what? There are plenty of others who have dropped supernatural thinking. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm still selective on just how clear I am, and with exactly who regarding my beliefs or lack of. I use the stage name Skeptical Scott for a reason, as some people, such as those I work with or could work with in the future, are not as quick to forgive a first impression, so I must protect that. But I also have that internal clear compass now. My bullshit meter, it's active, and I will speak up when I need to, or choose out when I need to. With a life of clarity, instead of being handed down my values to try to interpret what this hidden God really meant by them, or the authors, I get to create my own values, and I clearly define them. This has given me more clarity in all areas of my life: family, finances, friendships, activities. Life feels more exciting when I've already clearly defined what I want and then can pursue it. I mean, like YOLO, right? Yeah, I know. That was popular in like 2012, thanks to Drake. But man, it's true. You only live once. But careful, because YODO is also true. You only die once.
We think it's real important to question what you know. So before we leave this podcast, it's the skeptic of the show.
Hey, by now you likely know Carl Sagan. I featured him before. I loved his book, Pale Blue Dot, and today's quote is short and sweet to emphasize the magnitude of space. For small creatures such as we, the vastness is bearable only through love. Beautiful, right? We need each other as social beings. One of the purposes of this podcast is to help other skeptical people connect. There are many ways you can find your crew. And for me, that meant finding a place that would accept me exactly how I am, which was our local Unitarian Universalist church for the last 10 years or so. These days, I don't go very often, but I have friends there, and I occasionally join them on some activities, or we stay connected online. And speaking of online, I found a squad through Facebook groups and Zoom rooms, some who you've heard on this podcast. Other social media sites like TikTok can work too, as I'm sure many of you already know. Mostly, I want to remind you, there are plenty of secular people out there happy to connect. And if you can't find a local Facebook group, create one. Sometimes, though, there's nothing like actually meeting up with people face to face. The app Meetup, or its website meetup.com, is another place. You'd be surprised how many local groups there are surrounding activities that are not so church related. For all of these steps, though, it takes a degree of courage to be transparent and also reach out to people. I think I started testing that theory with my first podcast called ReChoice. It had a great run of 5 seasons and 133 episodes, well over 20,000 listens, and the topics were varied. Each episode featured a guest who would pick an event from their life in which they chose differently. The guest would also pick the title of the episode, starting with the letters RE. The idea was that instead of being stuck on repeat or rehash, they would tell how they were able to reanalyze, reboot, recharge, reframe, renew, etc. These episodes are still live at ReChoicePod.com, but during season 2 of that episode, I became more bold, and I finally tackled a topic close to my heart with the help of my friend Jimmy, whose music you hear at the beginning of each episode of Funny You Say That. That ReChoice episode, titled Recalibrate, featured other people from my area who had chosen out of Christianity. It was a top 5 episode in terms of listens and was the number 1 episode for feedback. Yes, some of the feedback came from people who were miffed that I'd even dare challenge supernatural thinking, or they felt their beliefs had somehow been mocked, even though that was not the intention of the episode. Most of the comments, though, were very positive, along the lines of, "Man, I thought I was alone." While I'm religious, I appreciated everyone's honesty. I respect how you handled what could be a challenging topic. You challenged my thinking. So let's go back a few years on my questimony to the first moment I publicly voiced my doubts in the supernatural to thousands of people on a podcast. How would you describe the spiritual makeup of the area in which we grew up in West Michigan, if you had to guess?
It's definitely heavily influenced by probably some reformist Christian, beliefs.
We're about to talk a little bit about our belief system, Jim and I. I'm just telling you, my heart beats just a little bit of even approaching this topic. I can tell you that I'm nervous even putting this episode out here. But at the same time, part of this podcast is being honest, maybe understanding people better. One thing that's different that's unique to this particular episode is from this point onward, we're going to hear from other listeners too, who are willing to share their recalibrate, in terms of their, particularly in their spiritual beliefs. And one thing that all of our contributors have in common, they either grew up or spent some time in the West Michigan area at some point.
My name is Marietta from Marshall, North Carolina. I grew up independent fundamental Baptist, and today I am an atheist. The experience that shaped my current belief was really just trying to go deeper in my relationship with God. And the deeper I tried to go, the shallower God became until he just disappeared entirely. The thing I wish people understood is that it was the desire to know God and understand him better that actually led to no longer believing in him. I was a pastor's kid and very indoctrinated, so it's not a matter of needing to read the Bible or understand it better. To me, the word spirit literally means the thing that animates these human bodies, that spark of life without which we would just be corpses. So spirituality is anything that gets us better in touch with life and our inner selves. anything that helps us to live better and more fully. One thing that brings me a sense of awe today is nature. I live in the mountains with a lot of forest around, and this is my happy place. It's also a huge part of my spiritual practice. And I truly believe that we should be focusing on making life better for every person on the planet. And that if we did that, we might even lose the need for a belief in deities.
All right, Jim. So I'd like to hear a little bit about yours. When you said it started really young and then it just kind of faded, why did things change?
I was just a kid, so other things started to become more interesting than something we weren't participating in. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure even if we had been participating, and by that I mean going to church on a regular basis, that I would have been any more interested in it, because to the best of my memory, even when we would go, I always find it kind of boring. Mm-hmm. It wasn't engaging for me, and I kind of found the stories not to be believable.
Mm-hmm. Just a little bit about my background, Jim. We didn't grow up in a spiritual household. I know that at some point my parents tried Catholicism. I think I was even baptized at birth. I know I tried it on. We were not a church-going family, that's for sure. And I remember looking around at others that were, and just kind of wondering why I didn't get it.
And that's a hard feeling. It's hard for a young person to reconcile. And there's got to be some people out there right now who are experiencing the same thing.
I think so too. If someone was just to ask you, what are your spiritual beliefs, Jim? How would you even today say, well, this is where I'm at?
Yeah, I'm unashamed to say that I'm an atheist. It's actually kind of easy from my perspective. There's just no compelling evidence of the existence of any one particular God, much less one God above any other gods. And that's basically what the definition of atheism is.
I would imagine too, in all the traveling you've done, you've probably had some experiences other than just West Michigan. Can you just tell us a little bit about what that makes you think of?
I've traveled into many places where the cultural background is different every single time. We lived in Tennessee for a little bit greater than 2 years, and that is a heavily outside of Memphis, because Tennessee is a big state, kind of just like Michigan is. So we were in the Memphis area, and that is a typical Southern Baptist area, and mm-hmm. everything is influenced by the Southern Baptist personality. So we had a hard time finding a preschool. So one of my kids didn't get to go to preschool because everything, I shouldn't say it like that. Mm-hmm. He could have went to preschool.
Yeah.
We chose not to send him to preschool. But the reality is there wasn't an opportunity for him to get a non-religiously influenced preschool experience.
Wow.
One of my kids, my oldest kid, he got to go to preschool. We lived in Hawaii, and their culture is different. So they have, deep historical and their own individual culture, and some of the mainland, especially the world religious influences are there, but there's plenty of opportunity for, non-religious based, and we don't even have to say secular education. It's just preschool that wasn't influenced by religion.
Maybe one way you and I were a little different is that I was always a bit compelled and found it interesting. I don't even know if that's the right way to say it. You know how you said it just didn't grab your attention? Yeah. It grabbed my attention, but not for, gosh, this is the answer. It was never like that. It was more of from an observer standpoint of, oh, look what's going on here. And I do find spiritual conversations very interesting. And the more I talk to people from variety of background, the more I'm realizing, well, what determines one's background spiritually? What determines someone's current religious beliefs? Many times it's, well, my dad, or well, my family, or well, from the area I live in.
It's a phenomena, and there are a lot of individuals out there who identify atheist or agnostic who participate in the regular religious activities such as going to church because it's the cultural phenomenon. And I'm going to say, unfortunately, that's my opinion on it. There are a lot of individuals out there who are non-believers who still go to church because they have to keep up the appearances that they are adherents to that. If not, they'll suffer extreme social consequences. And I'm not talking in India or Saudi Arabia. I'm talking about here in the United States of America.
Dude, I'm talking pastors.
That's right.
With certainly some of the reading I've done and conversations I've had where I've spent a lot of money and studying to get to this position. And what is it going to cost me to question? And in some ways, I really empathize for a person like that because that's a big cost.
I've, had the opportunity to interact with some people who, were Pentecostal, Southern Baptist preachers who at some point in their life, something clicked inside their brain where they realized that even though they were still wearing the cloth, they no longer believed in it. And they kept doing it for some period of time because they had to, or they felt they had to. They couldn't turn that life away without costing them everything in their life. And certainly has to be a trauma within that individual to have to continue on with basically what becomes a charade at some point because they feel obligated to by either, their community or whatever external pressures they have to keep that up.
My name is Kurt from Grand Rapids. I would say that I grew up Christian, and today I consider myself to be an atheist. One experience that really shaped my current beliefs was actually reading the Bible. I read the Bible a couple times in college, and it kind of confirmed which direction I was going to go. One thing I wish other people would understand is that atheism does not necessarily mean that you hate Christians or you're against Christianity. It just means that we don't believe the same that you do. One thing that brings me a sense of awe is the idea of chance, the idea of randomness, the idea that this isn't all planned, that things can change. And the fact that we are here today just shows me the power of nature and the power of how, because this molecule got together with this molecule, we ended up today the way we are instead of ending up a different way. To me, the world works perfectly well without something bigger.
There's definitely a cost when you are either atheist or agnostic, or you just identify as a non-religious person, or even if you don't, but you don't do the religious things, there's always a cost because there's events that happen where people are going to come together and they're going to, they're going to say something like, let's do a prayer before we eat the meal. And you have a choice at that point. You can either, bow your head and pretend to be participating in that, or you don't and you stand there. And you can be a jerk and you can just say, no, I object to this. But more often than not, you just stand there in silent in compliance, right? In silent compliance with that. That's just one of the ways that it is so easy to make somebody who's a non-believer feel like an outcast. And I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not blaming the individuals who do that. They think they're doing the right thing, or at least they're doing what they think is right for them. And that's fine.
Right.
But when you're a non-believer or you don't practice religion, you get put into those scenarios. And I don't even think some people realize that they're doing that to non-believers. That's the hardest part about it, right? There's some people out there who are oblivious to the fact that there are non-believers in their proximity, and they just carry on like everybody else believes exactly the same thing they do. And it's not even just non-believers, but there could be people that believe something differently that are not Christian.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've been asked to personally pray, right? And again, most of the time people are very apologetic afterwards when they realize it. And I guess that's what I mean by the cost of being silent is why would they? Why would they know if I've been being quiet? And so then there's also a cost of being open then. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead then and disclose why I'm uncomfortable. And I'm going to go disclose that I don't think the same way or that maybe I don't feel like I belong right now. There's a cost there too.
There definitely is. Yeah. Right? Because then people start treating you different. And, as much as it kills me to say that we shouldn't treat people differently. Like, even the atheist and agnostic people do the same thing, right? So I'm not at all going to pretend that atheist and agnostic individuals are better than anybody else. We're all just human beings, and we're all living life and going through and experiencing life in different ways. So it's not that one is good and one is bad. We all do this, but sometimes we just don't understand how it feels when somebody else is basically forced to disclose that they're different.
Hi, I'm Tara, and I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan. I grew up as a Christian Reformed Church evangelical Christian, and today I would consider myself to be a spiritual person, a seeker, someone who is open to exploring and hearing many different experiences from many different folks. And I would say one thing that enhances my spiritual practice is my yoga practice, the actual asana or posture and breathing, the link between asana and pranayama or postures and breathing, as well as my mindfulness or meditation practice. I find that being able to move my body and connect it to breathing, and also being able to be still and listen, has been extremely beneficial and has allowed me to become more open-minded and to discover more things about myself.
One of our listeners, her name's Catherine. She just says she feels very, protective of young people who are experiencing that need to belong, especially those who don't believe in an organized religion or are searching for what they believe. And so one, she wonders why it's so important to others to try and change what somebody else believes. And I'm using her words here. Generally telling someone what to believe pushes them away. She wanted to know from you and I, how do you respond to people who are really pushy about their beliefs?
So somebody shows up to my door, and this happened in Tennessee frequently, and they were always very nice. They they didn't want to be pushy. So I think there's some truth in that. The more you try to force somebody to believe something, the more likely they are to resist. So individuals who are trying to convert you into their way of seeing the world are typically very nice in doing it. And I've always just responded with that same politeness. Mm-hmm. And then at some point, if they become a little bit more assertive about it, then I also become a little bit more assertive. But I basically just am open. I'm at the point in my life where there's not a whole lot that my identity as far as my religious preferences go is going to harm me, mm-hmm. socially. Like if there's a group that I'm not part of because I don't believe the same thing that they believe, I am okay with that. Now, I understand that there's going to be young individuals out there who are grappling with this, and it's harder for them. So this is just a privilege of being older. Don't get me wrong. I have associates or people that I consider to be close friends who are religious, and we can talk about it. It's not that I don't like that individual. That has absolutely nothing to do with it. We just don't believe in the same things when it comes to one particular topic, right? We might disagree on some other things too, but that's all it comes down to. Of the 4,000 gods that have ever been known to exist in the mind of man for all civilization, they believe in one and I believe in zero. The things that I do, the actions that I take in my day-to-day life are not for some divine reward at the end of my life. They're because I'm trying to experience life as it is right now.
I've heard people say too, well, if I found out there really wasn't a God, or I don't know what I would do with my life. Life becomes meaningless. I wish people would understand that actually, to me, it feels more precious and more meaningful right now because I get one shot. Right?
Absolutely agree with that, right? And as for people thinking that, belief in God gives them the only meaning in their life. I feel sorrow, right? That makes me sad to hear people think that. That's devaluing all of your other relationships on this earth. And, unfortunately, I believe that they were programmed to think that the relationships that they have right now are of less value with something that the best argument anybody can come up with is you'll see when you're dead. I don't believe that there's an afterlife. If it were true, I would love it. I would love to have the opportunity to be able to live forever with my kids. But I don't believe that there's an afterlife. And there's really no reason to believe that there is an afterlife. The second you start doing that, then you take this life less seriously.
Let's say that's a powerful statement right there, Jim. And if there is an afterlife, at least in this, again, I'm talking very openly right now, listeners, and thanks for hearing us out, just hearing where we're coming from. But I feel like afterlife is how people are going to remember me, and the impact I've made on the world. And I think the world is going to have an afterlife, meaning after I'm gone, what's the world going to look like? And I do want a part in that. But like you, I think when it's done, it's done. My hope is that I've given it the best shot I have.
My name is Sarah Spearing. I'm originally from Grand Rapids, Michigan, but I'm currently serving in the United States Air Force as an officer stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. I grew up in an inactive Christian household, and today I consider myself spiritual. I also refer to this as A-team, whether that's atheist, agnostic, or simply ambivalent. I just don't subscribe to organized religion. I do, however, think that there is something bigger out there than just myself. We are all in the same boat. Without empirical evidence, no one should be forced to adhere to another's belief. I recognize that religion is often used as a catch-all for things that we simply do not understand, and I appreciate it as it has served a purpose and still serves a purpose. However, it simply does not work for me. I feel that I cannot subscribe to a specific religion if I don't truly believe in it, as that would epitomize the definition of hypocrisy. Simply subscribing to a certain faith alone does not make you a decent person. I believe people should be good and do good things, not as a path to heaven, but because the action itself is inherently good and doesn't require any type of reward. Do the right thing simply because it's the right thing to do. And for this reason, I believe that anyone, including atheists, can live a happy, moral, and productive life.
I hope we always question. That's the fun stuff, isn't it?
It definitely is. If I had to criticize individuals who, are religious, it would be that I feel like, or it appears to me as if they have just stopped seeking the truth on their own, right? They have somebody who's guiding them to the truth that they see, right? Or the truth that they want that person to believe. That's how I think churches operate, right? I think people who go to church go there and get spoon-fed what somebody else thinks they should believe. And even if they do some introspection and do some own research, they're affected by these internal cognitive biases that they don't recognize. Confirmation bias being number one. They don't say, well, okay, let me try to control my biases here and look at a different way to approach this problem. I've very rarely known any religious person to ever go to an atheist and say, let me get your point of view on this.
That's,
right?
Yeah. You bet. When someone finds out I have questions or have a differing point of view, I will say most have been respectful, but it's kind of like ghosting.
You were making a good point, right? It is that way, right? When somebody, finds out that you're an atheist at first, maybe they even want to ask you a question, they just don't. Every single year, there's, these unofficial sanctioned Ask an Atheist Day. You'll see it sometime on the internet, or, people get encouraged to go out into public place and wear a sandwich board saying, I'm an atheist, ask me any question you want. And I've seen videos of people who do that, and basically it becomes a target for beratement.
Yep.
And a target for, all of the nasty things that you'll hear some people who are religious say to atheist people. And, you can imagine what they are, right?
What do you appreciate from people who don't think like you do and how they treat you when it comes to this aspect? Or what don't you appreciate?
So let me say first that I'm open, but I'm not flagrant about my beliefs, right? Anybody who interacts with me for a period of time is eventually going to pick it up on their own. Jim's not participating in the lunch prayer program that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay. I'm at the point in my life where I'm comfortable with it.
I'm getting there, Jim. I'm not quite there with you, but I'm getting there.
Yeah, it's a process for everybody.
For sure.
And I have had some respectful conversations with people that I work with. And it's because we have developed a good rapport and a long relationship. So they're not threatened by me. They know I don't go home and sacrifice goats on the pentagram altar, right? After I've developed a long relationship with somebody, then we can have respectful conversations, and maybe sometimes we'll talk about some questions about belief. I don't go out and I don't try to push atheism on people. People are going to come to their own conclusions, and the more you try to push them towards something, the more they're going to resist. But I've had definitely some people who I've had good conversations with, and then gotten the absolute cold shoulder as soon as somebody finds out. Oh, I can only imagine how some people who are, struggling, with other things inside of them that they can't tell people, right? For me, it's kind of easy, and I know not all people are experiencing that, and for me, it's not that big of a deal. But I know there's a lot of people out there, whether it's their sexuality or gender identity or something like that. We need to do better as people to understand that, life is not defined by one characteristic of a person, right?
Wouldn't you say, Jim, that is one gift of, I'm talking about this specific spirituality thing, but you know what it feels like to be another.
That's fair to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm not Superman, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Behaviors and attitude towards the way that we treat each other is a huge turnoff for me. And from my experience, I really see it coming more from individuals who identify as being hyper-religious.
Hi, my name is Andrea. I'm from Rockford, Michigan. Well, I was raised Catholic, and today I consider myself an atheist, but also still a seeker. The main experience I had that shaped my current beliefs, even though it took decades, was the death of my father. I was 10 years old. I'm the oldest of 3 girls, and he was somebody who worked in the Catholic Church. He was a youth minister, and our household basically was this Catholic faith. Just everything was seeped in it, and it was talked about all the time, and he loved to share his philosophy and his faith with us, and he always made me feel like my opinion mattered, and he really wanted to teach me these things, and it was a special relationship. He was always kind and always a comforting father, but he also instilled in me that no matter what I needed to do was pray or have faith or ask, and things would work out. One day before school, he was shoveling the driveway and was going to take us to school, and he walked in and passed out, died instantly. And I sat downstairs. I brought my sisters downstairs as my mom did CPR and waited for the ambulance. I thought everything would be fine. I yelled at my sisters that we had to get on our knees and pray, and we did, and he didn't come home. And it's a sad story. As an adult, I look back and realize, of course, I'm not magical. Of course, I'm not directly attached or I don't have like a phone line into God. And it's not like everything works out great just because you ask for it. At the time, just because I had this child brain and that was my dad and he told me everything would be fine and it wasn't. So it crushed me on many levels. And I think that's where the journey started for me. I think it's great to hope for things, pray for things, whatever. But at the same time, we have to really look to ourselves to take the action to do the things that we want for ourselves and the good deeds that we want to share with our fellow people. And honestly, in my opinion, organized religion is a very egocentric type of philosophy, where everything, of course, revolves around us. That personal relationship with God. I think it's important for people to have what they need. And if that's something that brings them peace and joy, that's great on a personal level. But I just think that organized religion has been used so many times as a power play. And in that way, I don't think people are really looking at it as something that's bigger than them. I think they're looking at it as a tool to either describe what they want or get what they want. And that to me just brings it right back to that egocentric thing. One thing I wish other people would understand is that I am not angry at God. I don't believe there is a God. There isn't anything to be angry about. There isn't any reason that something like this happens. Tragedy hits everybody all the time. And I don't believe that there's everything happens for a reason is probably my most hated phrase, because I think that there's chaos, there's sickness, there's accidents, there's things that happen. And yes, our choices have a little bit to do with that, but sometimes things just happen.
One of the things that's pretty astounding, like statistically speaking, and of course, statistics can be fabricated and
Sure.
things like that. But, when you talk to most people who identify as atheists, especially those who have come out of religion at like later in life, or they fully were indoctrinated and they were doing all this stuff, what you'll find is most people who are atheists know more about the Bible than people who are religious, right? Because atheists tend to sit there and read the Bible and think about it and really figure out, like, hey, wait a second, this doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense because it doesn't jive with what's said in, this chapter or this verse or whatever the case may be. And like, hey, there's a contradiction here, there's a contradiction there. How can this be true? Well, that's true, and all sorts of stuff, right? So, what you find if you go on to and become part of, especially broad atheist groups, like, connecting through social media and things like that, is you'll find most atheists are very, very well versed in the Bible. And it's my belief that, most religious people read the Bible and they already have an idea what it's going to say to them. And it doesn't matter what the words really are.
Well, thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for your...
My pleasure.
Oh, yeah. And thank you for... I can tell, and I'm proud of you. I want to thank you for your honesty today. And, you stand and fight for others on many fronts. You really do.
Well, because that's what we have to do.
That's what
right?
we got to do.
That's
yes.
what we have to do. We have to have the courage to fight for others when they're unable to fight for themselves, or speak for others when they can't speak for themselves.
I hope you enjoyed those clips. The honesty of that episode was a weight lifted off my shoulders and led to a life of more clarity and real friendships. The original ReChoice episode with Jimmy and friends was well over 2 hours and included several other voices. And if you're interested, I have links in the show notes that has the entire episode in full. He has a podcast called The Internet Explorer. It's not so much, religious, but it does focus on skeptical thinking, the zany things that people believe, and it's very entertaining. Jim, thanks for being a good friend. Thanks for listening to Funny You Say That with Skeptical Scott and friends. Find all of our episodes and social media channels at skepticalscott.com. Our intro music was created by my friend Jimmy, who you just heard. Any other music or sound effects were provided by this week's co-host, Artie Fisher.
Have a question? Interested in being a guest on our show, or you just want to share a part of your questimony? Email us at heyskepticalscott@gmail.com.
Drop the supernatural, embrace the rational, believe in as many true things as possible.
Otherwise, you may end up believing in something that is even more artificial than me.
See you at least every first and third Friday. May skeptical thoughts be with you.
And also with you.
Cheers.